Hi, I'm Andy Clarke and welcome to my studio, Stuff and Nonsense. I'm a website designer, and on this channel I study work from designers outside the web, learn from them and apply those lessons to product and website design. Why is this important? Well, when you look around the web, you'll see that so many designs look exactly the same, with identical layouts, styles and typefaces that are used on countless websites. This isn't just incredibly boring, it's a massive missed opportunity to create something that reflects a client's distinctive personality and communicates what's unique about them. Designing something that stands out and improving product and website design often needs inspiration, and we can look for that in different places. For me, that frequently means looking in magazines and newspapers. So for this video, I discuss Karl Gerstner's work and how he used grids to create consistent yet creative layouts. Then I show how his work has inspired me to make a new set of Squarespace templates. Product placement. Let's start by talking about grids, which have a long and varied history in design, from the earliest books through movements like constructivism and the international typographic style, right up to today's popularity of frameworks like Google's material design or platforms like Squarespace. If you've used either of those, your first thought might be how you've aligned content to the 12-column grid that both use. But when you learn there's more to grids than 12 columns and then use them imaginatively, you'll find they can do so much more than just align content. They bring cohesion to a composition and suggest hierarchies. A thoughtfully chosen grid informs people what to read first, defines the position of valuable information, and it can lead to any number of exciting designs. Contemporary designers like Mark Bolton and Coy Vin popularized grid-based design for the web back in 2005. And it's really hard to imagine that grids were a new concept back then. Swiss artist and typographer Karl Gerstner was one of the first designers to exploit the creative flexibility of using grids. And it's the compound grid that Gerstner designed in 1962 for Capital magazine that's become one of his best-known creations. However, Gerstner had been doing interesting work in the Swiss style before he was commissioned to design Capital. Gerstner was born in Basel, Switzerland, a city that I know pretty well, in 1930. He studied art and design at Basel's Modernist General Trade School, where incredibly he was taught by Swiss typographer and graphic designer Emil Ruder. Gerstner began a 3-year apprenticeship at the studio of Fritz Bühler, where he met Armin Hoffmann, who would become one of the most influential graphic designers of the 20th century. Hoffmann's work was highly influential on Gerstner and on me, and I plan to make a video about Hoffmann's work in another month. After working as a designer in the Basel Ethnographic Museum, Gerstner became a freelance designer at Geigy Pharmaceutical Company in 1949. These are some of my favourites from Gerstner's catalogue of work. Like Giovanni Pintori's work at Olivetti, it demonstrates that seemingly uninspiring subjects can inspire incredible creative work. Gerstner left Geigy in 1953 and set up the Miro Basel Design Studio, where he made connections with other leading Swiss artists and designers, including Max Bill and Joseph Albers. He published a book, Kalte Kunst, which is Cold Art in English, in which he wrote about post-constructivist purity and simplicity. I've been planning on buying a copy of that book for years, but there were only 2,000 copies printed and it's really pricey. Gerstner said, "My typography has always been strictly related to the purpose, to the content. It was never formalistic. I always felt most comfortable when I was not only the typographer, but also the author." Gerstner designed and wrote the book, which makes it all the more desirable. Each of the 3 sections was printed on a different colour paper, and each spread had a theme. But the consistency of its layout makes the content flow. In another strange coincidence, I discovered that Gerstner's agency created adverts for Sinar, the Swiss large format camera maker that I worked with during the early 90s. In these ads, the shape of the word Sinar resembles the results of using swing and tilt movements on a large format camera. He followed cold art with designing programs, where he elaborated on Max Bill's ideas. The book illustrates Gerstner's theories, and its contents are divided into chapters and double-page spreads which form what he called visual units. In the book, Gerstner discussed program as grid and defined grid as a regulator for composition. He explained, it's a formal program to accommodate X unknown items. The difficulty is to find the balance, the maximum of conformity to a rule with the maximum of freedom, or the maximum of constraints with the greatest possible variability. His agency had designed what they called a mobile grid, although it's not the type of mobile that you or I are used to. And Gerstner used this compound grid for his famous design of Capital magazine. That was a human view of economics, an economic view of humanity. Given Capital's potential variety and unpredictability, Gerstner needed a grid to help him lay out content consistently and without restrictions. Search for compound grid, and this is what you'll likely find first. It's also the most likely to baffle you when you first see it. So why so complex? Well, to explain how he created it and how you can use it, I'll break Gerstner's grid down into its constituent parts. His mobile grid had 58 columns and rows, but he started with just one. Content in this single module fills the entire width. Then, Gerstner divided his single module into 2 columns and rows. This method results in a reassuringly symmetrical design. That large module can also be subdivided into 3 columns and rows. And if you notice, the gutters between the divisions in Gerstner's grid are always the same size. By splitting the large module into 4, the content columns feel formal, and the overall impression is that this design is serious. Dividing the page into 5 or 6 columns and rows enables just an incredible variety of layout options. A compound grid's flexibility comes from the interplay of 2 or more grids and how that affects the position and size of elements. This often makes a compound layout far more interesting than one grid in isolation. This grid allowed Gerstner to arrange content on Capital's pages rapidly and in a structured manner. It was flexible and allowed him to be creative when laying out his pages. It helped him solve design problems without dictating the final result. Studying a designer's work in another medium and applying it to the web can be a great way to learn. Gerstner took advantage of the modular nature of his grid to create an unusual layout for this spread for Capital. Although the 2 pages look very similar, they share a common foundation, and if you look closely, you'll notice how the visual weight of the large image on the left is balanced by the text columns on the right. I used 6 columns from Gerstner's grid, which should be pretty familiar if you're used to 12 columns. I blocked out the position of my images and text to help me decide on their placement and proportions. This wireframe illustrates the structure, which is going to be really helpful when designing and developing a design like this with HTML and CSS. Although the grid is symmetrical, the contrast between the large and small images creates a tension, which prevents the layout from feeling static. This composition could work equally well for an editorial design or an online store page. Flexible grids like this help us creatively arrange elements within a composition without dictating the final result. Even with the same underlying structure, results can look entirely different. I really enjoy how Gerstner used the height of the two tall figurines, which span multiple rows, to balance the pottery item to their left. I also like how the small coins fit neatly into modules, with their position and size defined by the grid. A wireframe illustrates the structure of the composition, which is incredibly versatile and can be adapted to many different types of content. Gerstner's agency worked on advertising campaigns and corporate identities for clients, including Swissair and Volkswagen. This is another happy coincidence given that my design examples are bursting with Beatles. Gerstner's grid is good for enabling designs with plenty of white space and for organising pages that are packed with content. This design for Capital contains multiple images and text blocks, which he arranged in a way that exposes his grid. My designs often need to accommodate several images and text in a limited space. To remain readable, those elements must be well organised and have a noticeable hierarchy. My wireframe informs the size and shape of the large image, which becomes the focal point of this design. The smaller images and text blocks flow around it, and they remain connected by the grid. This visual connection can be critical to communicate that elements within a design are also connected meaningfully. In this example from Capital, the images storyboard a narrative, and their placement reminds me a little bit of a comic book layout. The story I'm telling in this next Gerstner-inspired design is that the team members have a close relationship. So I arranged their portrait photos in a formal group on one side of the page. But sometimes I might want a looser looking layout to suggest a less formal arrangement, something that Gerstner achieved with this final design. It's really important to remember that grid should inform, not dictate, aspects of a design. This was one of the fundamental principles of Gerstner's grid design. Shifting elements inside the grid, pulling them out of their grid lines and arranging them so the eye flows across them will make a design feel less formal, looser, and more energetic. When he retired in 2006, Karl Gerstner donated his entire archive to the Swiss National Library in Bern. He died in 2017 at the age of 86, but Gerstner and his designs can teach us a great deal about improving our work on the web today. Gerstner said, "Graphic design is a matter of solving problems." One problem I wanted to solve was making Gerstner-style layouts easier for more people to implement. That inspired me to create Stuff and Nonsense premium Squarespace templates, one of which I based on his work. Gerstner is a premium website template designed for Squarespace 7.1. It combines classic layouts with a contemporary aesthetic and includes pages and custom elements to create an inspirational website design that will stand out from the crowd. Developed with Squarespace Fluid Engine to be fully responsive and look fabulous on any device, every template includes over a dozen pages. They can be easily customized with colors and typefaces to match your brand. We limit each Stuff and Nonsense Squarespace template to only 250 installations to help our customers' websites look distinctively different. You can find out more, see the live demos, and of course you can buy by going to stuffandnonsense.store. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe, bash the bell to be notified when the next one's available. What do you think about Karl Gerstner's work? Could it inspire what you're working on? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.